On the day my parents announced the division of their assets, the entire family was gathered. The atmosphere was fairly normal at first, until the gifts were revealed one by one. My sister received a brand new apartment in a high-end residential complex, fully furnished and located right in the city center. People murmured in admiration, and she couldn't hide her pride. Then it was my turn. My parents handed me an old, run-down house, cracked walls, a leaking roof tucked deep inside a narrow alley. The room fell silent for a few seconds. Then came the looks, pity, curiosity, even quiet mockery turning toward me one after another. I could feel the comparison in every glance. Someone sighed softly. Someone else shook their head. A few whispered that I was unlucky. My sister gave a knowing smile, while my parents offered only a brief explanation. They thought I was more suited to that house. I accepted it in silence, no protests, no complaints. In that moment, I understood that my life was about to take a completely different turn. After the assets were divided, the difference in how people treated my sister and me became impossible to ignore. She was constantly surrounded by attention, congratulations, questions, and praise, while I faded into a shadow within my own family. At gatherings, every conversation revolved around her new apartment, the luxurious interior, the convenience, the lifestyle. When my name came up, it was only for a few polite remarks before the topic quickly shifted. Some people were even blunt, telling me I should know my place and accept what I had been given. I listened to it all in silence, forcing a courteous smile. Inside, a quiet bitterness spread. But instead of resentment, I chose resolve. I began making plans to renovate the old house, seeing it as a chance to start over. I believed that no matter how low the starting point, with enough persistence, I could still build a life worth being proud of. During my first days in the old house, I was met with countless difficulties. The walls were peeling, the floors damp with mold, and the rusted metal roof rattled loudly whenever heavy rain fell. At night, the wind howled through the cracks in the doors, making sleep nearly impossible. But instead of giving up, I began fixing things bit by bit. I repainted the walls, replaced rotting boards, patched the leaking roof, and cleaned every small corner. Each morning, waking up to see the house gradually brighten gave me renewed motivation. The neighbors, curious at first, soon began to help lending tools, offering advice on repairs. Along the way, I discovered a simple kind of joy, completely different from the polished glamour of a luxury apartment. I came to understand that these quiet efforts were laying the foundation for my future, and that the worn-down house might become the starting point of something unexpected. While renovating, I accidentally discovered a bundle of old documents hidden deep beneath the cracked floor tiles. At first, I assumed they were just forgotten papers, but when I opened them, my heart skipped a beat. They were copies of land ownership certificates and several transfer contracts from many years ago. The faded stamps, aging signatures, and the address of the property sparked my suspicion. This house might not be as ordinary as it appeared. I took the documents to an acquaintance working in the legal field, and the answer I received left me stunned. The land I was standing on might fall within a major development zone, with a real value many times higher than anyone had assumed. In that moment, I realized that fate might be quietly shifting in a direction no one had expected. After receiving that advice, I began researching the area's zoning plans on my own. I went to the Department of Natural Resources and Environment, dug through land records, and reviewed upcoming development projects. The more I read, the harder it was to believe what I was seeing. The narrow alley leading to the old house turned out to sit right beside a major road scheduled for expansion in the near future. Even more surprising, the surrounding land had already been approved for a high-end commercial and residential development. That meant the value of the property could multiply several times over in just a few years. I sat there, stunned among stacks of documents, feeling as if I had just stumbled upon a life-changing opportunity. In that moment, I realized that what seemed like the worst gift could become the most valuable asset of all. But I also knew that revealing this information too early could change everything. So I chose to keep it to myself, waiting for the right moment to act. From that day on, my view of the old house completely changed. I no longer saw it as a burden, but as a long-term investment. I renovated the entire space, reinforcing the foundation, upgrading the electrical and plumbing systems, and refreshing the facade while keeping its modest appearance to avoid drawing attention. During the day, I went to work as usual. At night, I continued studying market trends and the area's development trajectory. I carefully recorded every figure and zoning map. Every move had to be calculated, because even a small mistake could cause the plan to collapse. Meanwhile, my sister kept flaunting her glamorous lifestyle, lavish parties, luxury trips. I simply smiled, without arguing or explaining. I knew that silence, at that moment, was my greatest advantage. And when the timing was right, everything would turn around in ways no one expected. As time passed, clear signs of change began to appear around the house. Project billboards went up, construction machines worked day and night, and the narrow alley was gradually widened. Land prices in the area rose so quickly that it left many people stunned. Neighbors kept asking questions. Some even offered to buy the house at prices several times higher than before. I refused every offer, sticking firmly to the plan I had set. Meanwhile, my family started to take notice. My mother probed repeatedly, her voice filled with suspicion, while my father grew restless, stopping by more often for unclear reasons. I knew they were beginning to realize the land's true value. But by then, I was no longer the easily controlled child I used to be. I stayed calm, kept my distance, and waited for the right moment to make a final decision, one that could completely change the balance within the family. One afternoon, I received a call from a major real estate company in the area. They requested a meeting to negotiate the purchase of the entire property. We met in a quiet cafe, where their representative spread out zoning maps and presented a price that nearly left me speechless. The figure was many times higher than the current market value and far beyond anything my family had ever imagined. I kept my composure, revealing nothing, simply listening and taking careful notes. After the meeting, I spent days thinking it through, weighing whether to sell immediately or continue waiting. At the same time, news of the project spread rapidly, turning the neighborhood into a hive of activity: buyers, sellers, and brokers coming and going nonstop. Pressure from my family intensified, especially when my sister began to grow impatient and push me constantly. I understood that the decision ahead would not only affect my own life, but could permanently reshape the relationships within my family. And it was in that moment of hesitation that an unexpected turning point began to unfold. Not long after that, my parents suddenly called me back for a family meeting. The atmosphere was tense, completely different from usual. My mother came straight to the point, proposing that I sell the land and split the proceeds equally among the family, citing blood ties as her reason. My father stayed silent for a long moment before speaking, his tone calculating as he argued that I should think about the greater good. I listened, but a bitter feeling rose inside me. When I was struggling, I had been nearly abandoned. Now that the land held value, I had become the center of attention. My sister didn't bother hiding her irritation, accusing me of being selfish and greedy. Her words made my true position in the family painfully clear. After the meeting, I left quietly, my heart heavy, yet growing firmer by the minute. I knew that if I kept giving in, I would always be treated as expendable. This time, I chose to protect myself, no matter what lay ahead. Following the family meeting, I began working even more closely with my lawyer to secure my legal ownership. Every clause in the documents was reviewed, line by line. Every small detail was checked with care. I didn't want a single loophole that could be exploited. During this process, I uncovered several ambiguities in older records that my parents had once signed on my behalf. Those red flags only made me more cautious. I understood then that this battle wasn't just about money, it was about fairness and self-respect. On the other side, my family kept up the pressure, from nonstop phone calls to messages filled with reproach. But I remained silent and focused on my goal. I stopped letting emotion rule my decisions and learned to think like an adult. With each passing day, I felt more clearly that I was entering a new phase of life, one where I would stand on my own strength and resolve, regardless of the blood ties trying to bind me. A week later, I received an official notice from the local authorities stating that part of my land would be reclaimed for a road expansion project. However, the compensation offered was far higher than anyone had initially expected. As a result, the value of the remaining land skyrocketed. The news quickly reached my family, and their attitude changed almost immediately. My mother suddenly became gentler, calling to check on me. My father suggested meeting privately to talk things through reasonably. My sister, who had once accused me, shifted to flattery, constantly emphasizing family bonds. These sudden changes left me feeling both sad and clear-headed. I realized how easily affection can be distorted when Lee comes into play. Still, I remained calm and didn't rush into any decisions. I knew this was a critical moment, one where every choice could shape my future, and my family's, in ways that could not be undone. The private meeting with my father took place at a small, familiar restaurant. He talked at length about the hardships of the past, about family pressure and the wrong decisions he claimed he had been forced to make. I listened, but I was no longer as easily softened as before. Those belated apologies couldn't erase the years of feeling abandoned. When he suggested that I redistribute the assets, I simply replied, calmly, that everything would be handled according to the law. The atmosphere instantly grew heavy. I could see the disappointment in his eyes, but I also realized something important. For the first time, I was no longer afraid of my family's disapproval. As I left the restaurant, I felt lighter, as if an invisible burden had finally been set down. I understood then that maturity sometimes begins with the courage to say no, even when it may hurt the people you love most. From that moment on, I was ready to face whatever consequences lay ahead. I returned to my parents' house with a heavy heart. Tension filled the room. My father was facing a massive debt due to failed investments, while my mother was panicking at the prospect of having to sell my sister's apartment to cover the losses. For the first time, I saw them truly afraid. The way they looked at me was full of hope, as if I were their last lifeline. My mother clutched my hand, her voice trembling as she begged me to help the family through the crisis. In that moment, I felt the sharp conflict inside me on one side, the future I had worked so hard to build. On the other, the blood ties and responsibilities I could not deny. I stayed silent for a long time, letting my emotions settle. Finally, I made a decision that left everyone stunned. I agreed to help, but only on the condition that all arrangements be clear, transparent, and fair so that no one would ever have to suffer another loss like this again. After all the agreements were signed, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief, as if a burden I had carried for years had finally been lifted. The money I received allowed me to stabilize my life, invest in my future, and build plans I had never dared to imagine before. My family also made it through the crisis, but our relationship had changed. There was no more control, no more favoritism, only clear boundaries, and the respect that should have existed all along. I came to understand that maturity is not about sacrificing yourself to please others, but about knowing how to protect your own values. Looking back on the journey, I feel grateful for that old, run-down house, because it taught me lessons in resilience, patience, and self-respect. From what once felt like an unfair beginning, I created a turning point in my life, opening the door to a new path filled with hope and freedom. A few months later, I returned to the old alley where some of my hardest days had unfolded. The house had been renovated into a small, cozy space, now rented out as a cafe. Watching people come and go, I couldn't help but smile. No one knew that this place had once marked the start of a journey filled with pain, yet deeply meaningful. I sat down in a familiar corner, sipping a hot cup of coffee and quietly observing life pass by. All the resentment and bitterness slowly faded, replaced by a rare sense of peace. I realized that forgiveness isn't about forgetting the past, but about freeing yourself from its weight. And in that moment, I knew I had truly entered a new chapter, one no longer bound by old wounds, but guided forward by faith and hope. On the way home, I pulled over beside a small park where children were playing under the glow of the setting sun. Their clear, carefree laughter made me slow down without realizing it. I suddenly thought of my younger self, lonely, lost, and deeply wounded. If I had given up back then, I might not be standing here today. Those trials, injustices, and losses turned out to be stepping stones to growth. I came to understand that while no one can choose where they are born, everyone can choose how they live. As dusk gradually fell, I continued on my journey. carrying a sense of calm and renewed faith. The road ahead is still long, but I am no longer afraid. Because now, I have learned how to stand on my own, heal myself, and write my own story with all my resilience and gratitude for life. One quiet morning, I woke up earlier than usual and opened the window to let in the cool morning breeze. Soft sunlight fell on the green potted plants, creating a peaceful scene I had always dreamed of. I made myself a cup of hot tea and sat quietly, watching the city slowly come to life. There were no heavy calculations, no pressure to prove myself, just the simple joy of the moment. Everything I had been through taught me to value the present and slow down amid life's hurried pace. I began planning trips, small projects with meaning for the community, and spending more time caring for myself. Deep down, I understood that happiness isn't about how much you own, but about a sense of inner fulfillment. And as the new day gently unfolded, I smiled, ready to welcome whatever lay ahead with calmness, trust, and lasting hope. On the day my parents announced the division of their assets, the entire family was gathered. The atmosphere was fairly normal at first, until the gifts were revealed one by one. My sister received a brand new apartment in a high-end residential complex, fully furnished and located right in the city center. People murmured in admiration, and she couldn't hide her pride. Then it was my turn. My parents handed me an old, run-down house, cracked walls, a leaking roof tucked deep inside a narrow alley. The room fell silent for a few seconds. Then came the looks, pity, curiosity, even quiet mockery turning toward me one after another. I could feel the comparison in every glance. Someone sighed softly. Someone else shook their head. A few whispered that I was unlucky. My sister gave a knowing smile, while my parents offered only a brief explanation. They thought I was more suited to that house. I accepted it in silence, no protests, no complaints. In that moment, I understood that my life was about to take a completely different turn. After the assets were divided, the difference in how people treated my sister and me became impossible to ignore. She was constantly surrounded by attention, congratulations, questions, and praise, while I faded into a shadow within my own family. At gatherings, every conversation revolved around her new apartment, the luxurious interior, the convenience, the lifestyle. When my name came up, it was only for a few polite remarks before the topic quickly shifted. Some people were even blunt, telling me I should know my place and accept what I had been given. I listened to it all in silence, forcing a courteous smile. Inside, a quiet bitterness spread. But instead of resentment, I chose resolve. I began making plans to renovate the old house, seeing it as a chance to start over. I believed that no matter how low the starting point, with enough persistence, I could still build a life worth being proud of. During my first days in the old house, I was met with countless difficulties. The walls were peeling, the floors damp with mold, and the rusted metal roof rattled loudly whenever heavy rain fell. At night, the wind howled through the cracks in the doors, making sleep nearly impossible. But instead of giving up, I began fixing things bit by bit. I repainted the walls, replaced rotting boards, patched the leaking roof, and cleaned every small corner. Each morning, waking up to see the house